fat, clumsy, wearing a tank top stained with greasy spots, thick glasses, and small dark mustaches on either side of his mouth. All of this, as you might expect, is the reason for countless mockeries and insults from his classmates. Vladimir, a 9th grade student at a regular secondary school, always reacted very calmly to all sorts of bullying, even though inside his feelings were in turmoil. Just like yesterday, when the oldest student in the class, Vitya, who had been held back twice, came up behind him and blew his nose right onto his back. 10 minutes later, Vova was sitting in his seat, listening indifferently as the teacher scolded the little bastard in a raised voice. With a brazen smirk, Victor explained that he just wanted to add another stain to Vladimir's t-shirt collection. The loud laughter of his classmates echoed in the poor guy's head, but, as always, not a single muscle on his face twitched. By the very next lesson, everyone acted as if nothing had happened. This morning, like every morning before, began with a weigh-in. The needle jumped off 0 and, swaying, stopped at 103. This didn't really upset Volodya. He had come to terms with it long ago. If anything, the morning weigh-in was nothing more than a habit. After a hearty breakfast and grabbing the McDonald's bag he'd prepared the night before, he slung his backpack over his shoulder and, surprisingly content, left the apartment and headed toward school. On the way, Vova stopped by the local shop that sold all sorts of spices and picked up a sauce called 16 Million Reserve. And just 3 minutes later, he left the shop so he wouldn't be late for class. Well. Who do we have here? Came the familiar, nasty voice of his enemy. Looks like the dumb pig decided to visit our municipal institution. As always, Volodya ignored the insults completely while tying the laces on his change of shoes. Only the irritated snorting annoyed him. Did your old man bring you here in the trunk or what? Ha! You wouldn't fit in the cabin anyway. Victor went on, grinning smugly. A couple more insults and threats followed, and then, as always, the saving bell rang, signaling the start of the first lesson. There was a knock at the door before the young, slender chemistry teacher, Svetlana Nikolaevna, peeked into the classroom. Her face looked anxious and a little upset. "Good morning, children," she greeted them. Unfortunately, we have to start with some bad news. The thing is, someone broke into the chemical storage room last night, opened the safe, and a container of sulfuric acid is missing, the one that was specially provided for our experiment during the open lesson. We don't know yet who did it, but we will definitely find out. I must warn you, sulfuric acid is a strong, dibasic acid, corresponding to the highest oxidation state of sulfur. It is extremely, extremely dangerous. So if any of you took it, please, for your own safety, return it. A hush fell over the classroom. Everyone was looking at each other mysteriously. It's normal to break a window or set a textbook on fire in the bathroom. But to steal something like that from the safe, that was something else. So, as I understand it, none of you are guilty. Well then, let's open our textbooks and write down the topic of today's lesson. The first 3 lessons went by quietly. Everyone must have been too preoccupied with the missing chemical to pay much attention to Vova. It was almost time for the break, and everyone was getting ready to go to lunch. Those who didn't go to the cafeteria would bring something to snack on from home. That's what Victor did too. Usually, it was sandwiches his alcoholic mother made for him, so he often made a habit of taking lunches from his classmates. Most of all, he loved something sweet, and even more so food from McDonald's, which Vladimir happened to have today. The bell rang, and the teacher left the classroom. Math class was over. The boy hadn't even managed to open his bag when a deep voice sounded behind him. "Volodya, as your best friend, I just can't let you get any fatter. So I'm going to take your lunch. Come on, hand it over." Reaching out, he grabbed the bag from the table. Vova watched him indifferently. "Bon appetit, you bastard," he muttered under his breath, surprised at his own boldness. Luckily, no one heard anything. Let's see what we've got here. Ooh, a Big Mac with fries. Not bad, fatty. Now I get why you weigh twice the normal amount. Vidya unwrapped the crinkling wrapper and, opening his mouth wide, tore off a juicy bite. Deliberately putting on a blissful expression, he chewed slowly, even letting out moans of pleasure. Vova got up from his seat and walked to the blackboard, making sure everyone could see him. However, Vidya, busy devouring the stolen bun, didn't even notice this. Taking a glass bottle with a crookedly stuck Sprite label out of his bag and placing it on the table, Vova grinned slyly. Next, he took his cell phone out of his pants pocket, turned on a piece of music, Frédéric Chopin's Nocturne No. 2, and placed it on the table as well. The endless noise instantly died down, and all eyes turned to him. Slowly, lifting himself up and stretching as high as he could, standing on tiptoe, he began to spin clockwise like a ballerina. His t-shirt rolled up, exposing his sagging, flabby belly. The boy's eyes were closed, and his face was filled with bliss. His classmates couldn't believe their eyes. So many years of mockery and bullying, and now it was as if he himself had agreed to become the clown, as if he had accepted his fate. The reaction was immediate. Within seconds, the classroom was filled with wild laughter. Everyone was pointing at him, literally rolling on the floor. But Vova didn't care about any of it. He completely gave himself over to his dance, which looked indescribably ridiculous and funny. And of course, cell phone cameras instantly appeared, recording everything that was happening on video. Still spinning, Vova reached into his backpack again and pulled out an A4 sheet of paper on which, in bold letters, was written, "Because he deserved it." Naturally, against the backdrop of such a spectacle, no one really felt like trying to figure out the meaning of that strange sign. Everyone kept laughing hysterically, pounding their fists on the wooden desks. Everyone, except for one person. Except for Vidya, who had just swallowed a serving of 16 million reserve sauce together with his Big Mac, and at that moment the burning sensation in his mouth was only just starting to kick in. As he spun around again, Vova, as if continuing the dance, took the cap off the bottle that was on the table and slid it a little closer to the edge, towards Vidya. Dozens of cell phone cameras kept recording what was happening. The reaction to the sauce was instant. Dropping his half-eaten burger, waving his hands frantically near his mouth, Vidya stomped around in place in a panic and couldn't get a word out. Of course, no one was paying any attention to him. And then, finally, catching sight of the bottle standing on the table, he made his way toward it. Meanwhile, Vova was hauling his whole bulk, legs and all, up onto the table and kept on dancing gracefully. Vidya, having reached the table and now in full view of the cameras, grabbed the bottle, brought it to his mouth, and, without a moment's hesitation, began to gulp it down frantically. A gulp. Another one. And another. At that moment, clutching his throat with both hands and dropping the bottle, which shattered with a crash, he let out a sound that resembled a cat hissing. A torrent of crimson blood gushed from his mouth, streaming down his lips, chin, and neck. The chorus of laughter that had been ringing out did not subside. Instead, it was replaced by the solitary, high-pitched giggle of Vova, who was dancing on the table. 10 seconds of solitary laughter, and the horrifying sight of Vidya convulsing on the floor, bleeding out. The acid had already burned a disgusting hole in his throat and, mixed with blood, was spilling onto the floor. A piercing scream from one of the girls echoed through the classroom. Immediately, his classmates picked up the cry, and panic broke out. The screaming, shrieking, and crying crowd nearly broke down the door in their rush to get out of the classroom. The screams and shrieks could still be heard even after the students made it outside. But Vova didn't care at all. Smiling contentedly, he kept spinning in his eccentric dance, as if nothing had happened.